Hello and good morning. So I'm very glad to be here again today. And this morning we're going to be doing Consultative Selling Part 4, the final section on the Consultative Selling methodology, which we started just last month. I think this is quite an interesting topic, and it should actually prove quite useful, I believe. So as normal, we know that the early morning show is every Thursday from 8:30 until 9 o'clock. So we have this shorter shorter broadcast. And the previous interviews that I do these now as standalone broadcasts, because I think an hour is quite a lot of your time. So if you're interested in the other interviews that I do with various partners and managing partners, well, you can see them on the Nicodonia YouTube channel. And if I think it's particularly useful, I'll email you about it. So don't worry. And if you can hear a little bit of sound in the background, that's because I'm joining you from Heathrow here in London Airport. So not the best location to broadcast, but better than nothing, I suppose. So as normal, you can see that we have the 16 key concepts, which we're going to be covering today. And in today's broadcast on the topic of consultative selling, we're going to be examining, how do you negotiate or find the common ground with your clients or potential clients? In the previous session, we had looked at the different sales methodologies of finding the different needs of clients through asking the different open questions. We had identified that generally in most law firms, the approach to client consultations is basically improvisation, or something which I call a black box approach. In reality, we don't have any idea from a sales perspective what the different partners and lawyers are actually doing with in the client meetings. And so the quality of a legal consultation doesn't necessarily depend upon the law firm that you're speaking with. Depends more on the luck of the draw, whichever partner you speak to. Before that, we also saw in consultative selling the whole topic of T marketing. So that's the beloved T for two, probably one of the best things that you can do with a client or an ex-client, a potential client. The different types of T for three. We have matchmaking, cross-selling, and active referrals. T for four, even, which is kind of like a double date and the cross referrals. So if you missed that previous session, that's consultative selling part 2, that's already on YouTube and you can see it there. And in today's broadcast, I'm going to look at more of the negotiating aspect of consultative selling. So I think that might be useful. Maybe some of you have studied negotiation in consultative sales, but if not, then it might be something new for you. So perhaps the first concept to begin with today is that when you are in the end stage of a client consultation, let's imagine you've done your trial closing, and now you're negotiating about price, the most difficult part of the consultation. It's good for you to have a thing called a BATNA. This is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What this means is you shouldn't stick to simply positional bargaining. Positional bargaining means, let's say we're talking about doing a piece of work for a fixed fee. You're thinking we can't go any lower than 10,000, and they are thinking they don't want to go any higher than, let's say, 8,000. You're going to have a little bit of a bit of a problem. So BATNA means when you look at your interests and you envisage, in the event that you can't reach an agreement, what is your walkaway point? What is your alternative or alternatives? So perhaps, if you're going to be stuck in positional bargaining with that 8,000 to 10,000 gap, you might try and think of some other creative solutions as your BATNA. Could we do this under a success fee? Could we do this using some outsourced services? Could we change the scope? So the more BATNAs that you have, the greater your leverage and flexibility. You won't feel pressured into taking a bad offer. So again, like with client consultations and client meetings, this comes down to preparation. You should be prepared in advance of your meeting to actually have some BATNAs. Now, I already kind of mentioned about the traditional approach to negotiations with a client. And this is kind of called positional negotiation or traditional negotiation. This is what we generally think about when we think about negotiations. In this case, the parties are adversaries. It's a win-lose situation. It's going to be hard on both the people and the topics, and we're defending our positions. What we need to aspire towards in good consultative selling would be more principled negotiation. In this case, we're looking for a win-win solution. We're looking more at the interests behind the positions, and that allows us to have more creative solutions. And of course, we have our BATNAs prepared. So I think when lawyers, especially lawyers, haven't had any training in consultative selling or in negotiation skills, when they think about negotiation, they're going to traditionally think of the traditional negotiation, like you see on television. That's not the best approach to us. The more principled negotiation, the constructive solution, the win-win for the long-term relationship, that's what we need to be aiming towards. And again, I repeat, very much focusing on the interests rather than the position. So this is more a kind of collaborative approach to find a solution that is mutually agreeable and beneficial. If you'd like a paper on principled negotiation, you can email me, jjmcveigh@nicodonia.com, and I can share one with you. And of course, I've already mentioned the very big part of success in the negotiation is basically the preparation. And the big dark secret in most of legal services is that there isn't a lot of negotiation preparation happening at all. So not only do we need to understand our BATNA, we can get to background research, the KYC procedure. The background research, you can actually delegate that down to one of the associates, one of the juniors, to help you with. You don't need to do all of this yourself. We can do a thing called trident planning, which you might have seen in one of my previous broadcasts. Trident planning is basically contingency planning. We can envisage a probability tree of how this negotiation is going to go. We can envisage common objectives. We can envisage what their interests are likely to be and not get distracted by their positions, and then to be prepared for those in advance. Good negotiation preparation will speed up the process of the negotiation itself and result in a better solution for everybody. But of course, we have to be aware that there are difficult people, let's put it that way, that we might encounter in our negotiations. So in the next 6 slides, we're going to look at half a dozen categorizations of difficult parties to negotiate with, the difficult people, and what to do and what not to do with them. So first of all, we have the exploder. So the exploder is a very kind of dramatic name, and this is a person who's always on the attack. They're abusive, intimidating, overpowering, they're always right, and often they seek to demonstrate a lack of caring and respect. They might even have temper tantrums, raging outbursts. This kind of behavior is basically a result of feeling threatened when they can't cope with the situation. Of course, I hope you don't encounter this kind of client. Maybe it would be a good indicator that this isn't the client you should actually then be working with. But if you find yourself in this position with an exploder, you don't worry about being polite. You get your point across. You don't argue what they say. You don't try to cut them down. You maintain eye contact. You give them some time to calm down. You might even suggest having a little time out, take a coffee break, a cigarette break, and you can state your thoughts and opinions forcefully without apology and be ready to negotiate. This is perhaps one of the more extreme examples of difficult people, but sooner or later you're going to encounter it. Another type of difficult person that you can encounter in consultative selling and negotiations would be the complainer. So this person, the complainer, well, what can we say about them? They basically find fault with everything. And they hold the idea that someone should be doing something about their problems. They're not going to really be that productive in problem solving, and they kind of feel powerless to change things. I would be wondering if you're actually speaking to the right person. This might not be a key decision maker. This could be a gatekeeper. So maybe you're negotiating and consulting the wrong person. Complainers often also do like to feel free from responsibility for any problem as well. So getting their engagement is going to be a bit of a problem. So what should you do and what shouldn't you do? Well, with the complainer, I think you should listen attentively to the complaints, show them that you're listening by paraphrasing and summarizing for them, state the facts without comment, and ask them, put it on the table. How do you want this discussion to end? You shouldn't agree or apologize about their complaints, and don't get into this kind of accusation, defense, accusation game, because that's just going to go nowhere. So we can see how to deal with an exploder, how to deal with a complainer. Next, a funny one, and I have encountered this one myself, is called the clam. So the clam, like the shellfish, I think you can kind of guess what this is about. This is a frustrating person to negotiate with because they're silent and they only just give yes or no answers. They tend to be very hard to open up, and they can be quite stubborn in maintaining just one stance. They might do this, I suppose, to mask fear or anger, or just to refuse to cooperate. This is very frustrating. A clam won't effectively communicate with and won't be easy to deal with. So in this case, what could you do? What shouldn't you do? Open questions. Again, we've seen this before in consultative selling. You should be asking lots of open questions. How, why, what, where, when. That forces them to speak with them. Be patient. Wait for a response. Spend extra time with them. Understand that silence, it's going to happen, and you don't get uncomfortable with that and fill the silence with words and distract them. Comment on what is happening. Try and structure the negotiation, and don't break the silence. Be willing to play that game. If that's what they're going to do, then you're willing to play that, and you're going to take as much time as you need. Another kind of difficult person that you can meet in consultative selling, in negotiations, and quite often it's the in-house counsel. This is a know-it-all. So the know-it-all, quite often this is going to be another lawyer. They consider themselves to be an expert on all of the matters, even if it's not the case, and they might feel, and perhaps even show, that others are stupid or uninformed. They often react to other people's knowledge with anger, withdrawal, irritation, and they want to take control of everything. This can be quite an arrogant, conceited person to deal with, so you need to be you need to bite your tongue here a little bit. Be prepared and have all the information possible. You want to show that you do know something, you have information, you're ready. Listen carefully and paraphrase the main points so that they see that they're being heard. Be tentative in disagreements and use questions to raise problems. Perhaps sometimes flattery can actually work with an Einstein to soften them up a bit. So maybe try a little bit of flattery, but don't reflect being a know-it-all back to them. So if they're showing that they're a no, don't play this game to reflect it back to them, because they're not going to like it. And you mustn't overgeneralize. You need to be as specific as possible. I think, from these previous difficult people, the exploder, the complainer, the clam, and the know-it-all, I would expect you're more likely to be meeting the know-it-all again in the legal industry. Next, we have a very frustrating, difficult person in consultative selling, is the staller. So the staller is indecisive. They're not great at communicating. They lack follow through after meetings. The staller often leaves others to do the work, is undependable. Their typical response is no response. And in fact, they might be quite comfortable indeed with the status quo. If it's not broken, why fix it? The staller usually cannot make up their mind, even if they wanted to. And of course, myself in negotiation, I think I find this the most frustrating of difficult people in consultative selling, because I want to get things done. I want to move things quickly. And this is so annoying. So what do you do with a staller? Be open to listening to the conflicts and difficulties the stallers have in making decisions. Listen for indirect cues, for underlying issues. Try problem-solving techniques and focus on facts. Support any decision maker and have clear CTAs, very clear calls to action. Perhaps you shouldn't even rely on them alone to come up for the solutions or to respond, and aim for other KDMs or to go around them. I find stallers extremely frustrating because it is so often just a waste of time. Again, I would question, is this the right key decision maker that you're speaking to? And the last of the difficult people that you're going to encounter in negotiations is the dizzy one. The dizzy one, this is just a negotiating partner who's rather scatterbrained, to be honest. They might be trying to do much with too little. I see this happening with some partners who are just basically overloaded. They're running around all over the place and they don't know what they're doing. The dizzy one might actually be a gatekeeper. So again, then you're speaking to the wrong person. You need to chase around them to get to the key decision maker. And I think you can quite often spot a dizzy one that not a lot is going to happen with them, even if they have good intentions. So explore what you can do, diplomatically identify KDMs above or behind the dizzy one, be very structured for follow-up, and don't expect them to answer emails at all. You know, basically that's not going to happen. I think you're going to have to pick up the phone if you're dealing with a dizzy one. And again, don't expect much. You could end up speaking here with a gatekeeper, as a matter of fact. And so that might be a reason it's a dizzy one. So again, it might not be the right thing to do to overgeneralize, but just based on my experience in different negotiations and consultative selling, I've kind of identified these 6 difficult people. And these are my tips and tricks of what you should do and what you shouldn't do with them. You have the exploder, which is extremely unpleasant. You have the complainer, with whom I don't empathize, but you come across them. You have the clam. Yeah, I've seen this quite a few times. You have the know-it-all, perhaps the most common of the difficult people you're going to encounter in negotiation. You have the staller, and you have the dizzy one. Again, if you are interested in further information on this, I have a paper. So jjmcveigh@nicodonia.com. Perhaps it's not appropriate to categorize, but I find that some of the common tips and tricks, the best practices or the worst practices to avoid, might be quite useful. Or I find it useful when I come across these people. In any case, when you're doing consultative selling, and especially at the negotiating stage, when you're talking about pricing towards the end of your consultation, you do need to be careful about trigger words. And a trigger word is a word or an expression can provoke a response. Trigger words, for example, a very common trigger word would be killer but. If you say something nice, but, and then you say something else, but kills anything nice that you said before it. So be very careful with the trigger word killer but. Replace it with constructive and. Put it in a more positive light, and it's going to be more likely to be digested. And in a similar way, that good but bad doesn't work, because but focuses on the bad and kills the good. This kind of sandwich approach in negotiation or consultative selling, when you say something good, something bad, something good, still doesn't work either. So that sandwich approach doesn't work. Change your conjunctions into positive and. Keep it into a positive form. Other trigger words to avoid are calm down, especially if you're speaking to an exploder. I don't know. I'm sorry. You can make an entire list of different killer words and expressions which are trigger words, and these are not good to put into your negotiation. So be quite careful about what you're actually saying. And when you're in the negotiation stage, not only do you need to be quite careful to avoid the trigger words and to wind up somebody, especially if they correspond to one of those 6 difficult types, but you really, really, really mustn't be making unilateral concessions. So in negotiations, a unilateral concession, this is basically when you give something for nothing. My favorite example of this is absolutely dreadful, and everyone's doing it. Client says they don't have budget, they ask for a discount, and then we say, okay, for our good future relations, here's a 10% discount. That's a unilateral concession. Never give discounts, but never give unilateral concessions. If you're in negotiation, you don't give something for nothing. It has to be in exchange for something. Talking about the discounts, for example, maybe you would change the scope. You change the discount into a downsell, do a smaller product or a simpler product. That might be an approach to take. A unilateral concession isn't valued, isn't appreciated. It loses you leverage. So you don't do that. Think of it a little bit like consideration, you know, under English law. Something has to be in exchange for something. Of course, we're not selling potatoes. We're talking about legal services. So I don't like the example of volume discounts. So we say, okay, if you give us 10 due diligences, we'll charge you the price of 9. That would be a volume discount. In that case, there is a concession. It's not a unilateral concession. It's better than nothing, I suppose. But again, I really, really, really wouldn't recommend doing the discounts at all. What we aim towards, however, is, of course, the win-win solution. if you're following principled negotiation rather than traditional negotiation, you understand that we're wanting to have the long-term client relationship. We understand the value of the customer lifetime value. And even if you have a very nice transactional relationship, you really beat them in that negotiation, it's going to be a kind of Pyrrhic victory, a short victory. So we don't want to do that. We do want to have the win-win solution. So again, what's the main thing to think about here? Not the positions, the interests. The position, for example, the number, is coming from the interest. That's related to perceived value. It's related to understood scope and time, and all of these other factors. So dig deeper beyond the positions that a person has. You can see the interest, and they allow you to have more constructive solutions to meet their needs. And if you have a win-win solution, everybody's happy, and you're going to negotiate further and do further business together. Perhaps one of the most common mistakes in the negotiation itself is our favorite one as lawyers, which is we talk a lot. I'm guilty of this as well. Talk less, listen more. Especially in consultative selling, you should be following the 80-20 rule, asking open questions 20% of the time to identify needs, and then speaking only 20% of the time. And in the negotiation stage, at the end of your consultative selling, this is even more important. So really do talk less, listen more, and you do active listening. You paraphrase to show that you're listening to them. You repeat back to them what they're saying, and that they're going to feel heard. In the end, however, you do need to be willing to walk. If your position isn't going to be met, and if your interests are not being satisfied, and your BATNA, there's nothing else to do but to go to the BATNA, you need to know when you're willing to walk, so that you don't end up accepting something which you're going to then later regret. So that would be something that you find in your preparation stage. And of course, whoever is in the greatest hurry in the consultation or the negotiation is the weaker party. You need to show that you have time, that you have patience, and that time is no matter at all. If the other party is in a rush, if they hurry, they are going to be much more malleable and much more easy to push into accepting a position. So whatever you do, don't show that you're in a hurry, especially if you are, and understand that if they show they're in a hurry, that means they're in a position of weakness, and you can take advantage of that. But again, all of this isn't going to do you much good from a sales perspective if in the consultation and the person that you're negotiating with isn't a key decision maker. So of course, our main objective in business development is to get meetings. Face-to-face meetings are ideal. If not, then at least by Teams or Zoom. Meetings proactively generated with current ex or new clients, that's our main metric of success. Not how much time you spend doing this, and definitely not marketing. It's meetings. But then, of course, the second most important thing is what comes from these meetings. We're not doing meetings just for the sake of meetings. A proportion of those meetings should be mandates. And that's not going to happen if you're not speaking to the key decision maker. The antonym, the opposite of the key decision maker, of course, is gatekeeper. Gatekeeper is there to basically keep you out, keep you from getting your position. It might be an office manager, middle management. Sometimes it's in-house legal counsel, HR. Be sure to actually refuse a meeting. I think this is going to come with experience. You're going to see that a number of meetings that you do don't go anywhere, and it's predictable they won't go anywhere because you're speaking to the wrong person. I would even be so pushy that if you've pitched a CEO or a general director and they've delegated this to some gatekeeper, don't waste your time. Don't speak to them. Nothing's going to come from it. Of course, you should be tracking your conversion from the meetings anyway. And if you do an analysis after speaking to a few dozen people, and you see that a good percentage of the key decision makers, the CEOs and founders, do convert in giving you a mandate, and you see a number of other people with different titles, for example, HR, in-house legal, don't convert, then you'll be able to have the numbers behind you to understand these profile of people are gatekeepers, and it's not worth your time speaking with them or negotiating with them. And of course, in terms of your communication, it's a really good idea. I don't think you can see it behind me here. It's called the FAB methodology. When you're trying to persuade the other party, in the negotiation, in consultative selling. When you're trial closing, you should be able to talk about the advantages and benefits of what you're offering. So we've seen this before, that the features are the concrete characteristics of your product or service or your law firm. And then you show what's good about them. That's the advantage. And then further, what's good about that? That's the benefit. So this is called to fab. On the screen, you can see that I've fabbed an ESOP. So we know what an ESOP is, an employee share ownership plan. As lawyers, we're more likely to describe that in a negotiation or consultation in terms of the legal technicalities and the features. That isn't going to persuade the listener. You need to connect those to the advantages and then to the benefits. That's what's actually going to persuade somebody. Actually, I'm thinking I probably should do a different session just about the FAB methodology. If you're interested in this, again, write to me, jjmcveigh@nicodonia.com. I have a paper and slides about this methodology. Very simple, but very powerful. And almost no lawyers can actually use that in negotiation or in consultative selling. So I think we're kind of running out of time here. So I should probably wrap up for today. The audio isn't as good as it could be. If you have any questions about consultative selling, you'd like the slides or those different papers, drop me an email, jjmcveigh@nicodonia.com. And keep in mind, next month, and then for 6 months, I'm going to do these hybrid sessions on legal writing. So for free, you can join these 6 one-hour broadcasts, which are going to be from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock Central European time on the dates above. It's the last Thursday of each month. I think there's going to be a lot of demand. I did one of these in February and it got something like 3,500 lawyers and partners in Central Europe actually watching it. So that's a lot of lawyers. That's the free part. It's the theory. It's based on my book, The 36 Rules of Legal Writing. So in each broadcast, we'll cover 6 of these rules. And then as an optional add-on, which isn't free, there is me doing the exercises and practice for the law firm or group of law firms, either in person or by computer. So if that's interesting for you as well, you can drop me a line and we can schedule that. But even if not, as a free resource, those 6 broadcasts up to the end of the year could be useful for you. Okay, so I think on that point, let's wrap up for today. And I hope to see you next Thursday, where we're beginning the next topic in business development training. And we have just four more broadcasts in the coming month to the middle of June. And that will be the end of this season of the early morning show. Okay, thank you very much.